Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Kimberlin Education client event, Connecting to Classrooms in a Digital World. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And before we begin, I just want to start off with a quick acknowledgement of country. So Kimberlin Education acknowledges the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and in Alexandria, Sydney, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And we also want to extend a welcome to First Nation people across the country. We also pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So my name's Katie Street. I am the Senior Education Manager at Kimberlin Education, and I'm going to be hosting this webinar today. We have got a treat for you in the form of a few fantastic educational experts that we're going to call upon for their expertise. So before we do that, let's have a look at the layout of our session today. First of all, we're going to do a bit of an introduction about the shift to remote learning and online learning throughout the pandemic of 2020, and then we're going to have an expert panel of clients and ex-teachers and current teachers to ask a couple of questions to you about their own experiences of connecting to classrooms in a digital world. And then I'm going to open up the floor to you guys joining us today for a bit of an open Q&A. So if you do have any questions, do pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A box on the Zoom today, and then we'll finish with a bit of a wrap up. So let's get started. What a year it's been. I'm sure everyone can agree. It's been a bit of a tough one for everybody, and we've had so many changes both in the educational world and without. A lot of changes have presented themselves, and there's been a real need to adapt for both teachers and students this year. The rapid switch to online learning has been a huge part of the educational year of 2020. Around 67% of teachers across the world taught online for the very first time this year in April and May, and that's research from the School Education Gateway. There was, of course, disruption in both teaching and learning, and UNESCO research actually found that 74% of all learners have been affected by school closures. That's nearly 1.2 billion students. There's a few. Now, this obviously resulted in extra stress for teachers, students and parents across the world and across the country, both in mental health terms and in academic terms. And it highlighted extreme emotional inequalities between socioeconomic groups, such as access to resources, socio-emotional skill development, and of course, academic development as well. Now, this, of course, has shown the deepening of existing problems in schools, such as student motivation and teacher workload, something that we think a lot about at Kimberlin Education. And this has resulted in some of our lovely clients being terribly impacted and affected by their own educational programs, especially those that have excursion or incursion programs. So what is clear, though, is that we've all had to transition to a digital platform. Many of you have been conducting meetings on Zoom this year, many of you from the comfort of your own home. And we've had to adapt to this faster than ever before. So, and at the same time, our poor teachers in Australia and across the world have struggled to keep up with the ever-changing digital landscape and educational landscape. So I want to launch a bit of a poll here. And the poll is to see what you think was the most challenging aspect for teachers in 2020. Do you think it was the rapid shift to online teaching? Do you think it was managing work from home? Maybe it was engaging students in online learning, or perhaps it was meeting parent expectations in a changed environment. So get voting and we'll have a look at those results at the end of this session. So now I'd like to introduce Terry. Terry is our fantastic General Manager at Kimberlin Education. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Katie. How you doing?
Good, thank you. So I wanted to get your opinion on what all of this in 2020 means for brands trying to get their educational message into the classroom.
Absolutely. I think before I go to that answer, I'd like to talk about a statistic I saw yesterday, actually. It was 35% of Australian teachers felt confident that their students were learning well during remote learning. That's not very much. And it really made me reflect on my own experience. So I've got a daughter who's just started high school, and what I was able to see was some of her teachers really embrace these digital online platforms, chat, video, collaboration tools, games. And I think that they really engage with their students. And then there were other teachers who really struggled. And you could see that they just did not feel confident in that. And I think what this reminded me of is that we must always put ourselves in the teacher's shoes. We must always think about them. They're the gatekeepers to any educational campaign we do. So when we're chatting to our clients and we're consulting to them on, the best way forward with digital platforms, there's 5 key areas that we always discuss. So the first one is digital in classroom does not equal digital at home. So a lot of clients, obviously, who work in the consumer space, they're really keen to, reference games and apps and things that, students are using in their home life. But the school environment is very, very different. There are a lot of restrictions, and that can be based on state, type of school. It can also be based on whether a school has a BYOD policy. We here actually have a great deal of understanding of that landscape. So it's really important that you consider that, because you don't want to use developers who don't have that understanding. They create something and then it doesn't work in the classroom. The second key area that we always consult with our clients on is that the story is key. So you can have a fancy digital platform, but if the story you're telling is not linked to the curriculum in the appropriate way, it actually won't get past the teachers, it won't get into the classrooms, and the students will not engage with it. And it's really, really key that you look at things like straddling different key learning areas as well. So can it be applicable to maths and science and history? Because then teachers are likely to take it up and use it. The third area that we like to talk about is, does the platform allow for different learning styles? Back when I was, going through school, one size fit all. You would learn something and then you would just regurgitate it back. So these days they do much more around 21st century work skills, which is about creation of content, not just consumption. So you must consider this. You pass your brand message to students, but then you want to see that they've learnt it and how they apply that and through different skills. So it's really, really important that your digital platform actually allows for that. It's also different learning styles. Tactile learners, kinesthetic learners, people take in different things. So it's important that you apply that as well. The fourth thing we talk about is marketing. It's not just a case of build it and they will come. You have to be out there telling teachers that this exists. So that's an ongoing need to ensure that you've got budget allocated to marketing. And the last one is we must make teachers' lives easier. As the example I gave where teachers are struggling, I mean, they're already so challenged as a group of people, and being flung into this environment where they're now having to use digital tools even more than before. We must make sure that our digital tools actually add value to them, not actually subtract. So they're the kind of 5 considerations that we always consult our clients on when they're trying to get educational messages into the classroom.
Absolutely, and super important to actually draw attention to the value that we place on teachers as a group of professionals here at Kimberlin. So thank you for that, Terry. So what does that mean for Kimberlin Education? What have we been up to that allows our clients to be able to engage with those 5 things?
So look, we do a number of things. So one of them was we still create bespoke applications for our clients. So that might be a website, might be games, it might be apps. Some, it's ensuring that the message is right, obviously, for the platform. The second one is LMS. So we've got a learning management system that we use here. This has been an awesome tool, in fact, because you can create interactive lessons through it and students learn at their own pace. But the most wonderful thing about the LMS is that it allows for reporting and analytics. So a lot of boards and stakeholders are starting to ask our clients, where is the engagement levels of the resources that you're creating? And the LMS enables that. So it's a fantastic offering. And I know George is going to talk about this later, but virtual classrooms, And I think the wonderful thing about this is we have people like yourselves, Katie, who host these, and these are actual, classrooms that are in environments just like the one we're in here, and we have an expert from the client, and we kind of put a human face to our clients' brands and their messages, and that really resonates with the students. So they're just some of the platforms that we're using.
That's great. Thank you so much, Terry. So now we're going to open up to our expert panelists today, and I might get you guys to introduce yourselves. So please turn on your mics and your cameras. We have got Georgia Good from Meat and Livestock Australia. Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Katie. How are you doing?
Really,
thank you. I'm the Community Engagement Officer at Meat and Livestock Australia. Yeah.
Awesome. And how do you know us at Kimberlin?
So we've worked with Kimberlin over a number of years on our virtual classroom program, not just that program, a couple of others as well, especially this past year with COVID. We've been diving deep and yeah, we've started a couple of other programs with Kimberlin. So yeah, we work really closely with you guys.
Thanks, Georgia. And we've got Sean de Morton from Cricket Australia. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Katie, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm pretty new at Cricket Australia. I'm the teacher and education specialist, so creating resources, webinars and resources directly facing out to teachers. Being an ex-teacher myself, only last year I still sort of feel like a teacher. But yeah, it certainly allows me to have that even larger impact and really help teachers to deliver in schools. So and I've obviously had the privilege of having you as a guest in the cricket classroom webinar. So it's nice to be able to be a guest in your webinar tonight. So thanks for having me.
We look after each other, Sean, don't we? And Fergus Brown from our very own Kimberlin Education. Hey, Ferg.
Hi, Katie, Georgia, Sean, and everyone out there. Yes, I've just recently joined Kimberlin as an education manager. Like Sean, I'm not long out of the classroom, maybe a month now, so not very long at all. And I've come from Newtown High School of Performing Arts in inner city Sydney. So my background's senior history. Spent many years there and many years as a musician making kids music as well.
Amazing. Thanks, guys, for joining us. So, Sean, I might start with you, and I wanted to get your opinion on whether students respond better to digital platforms and programs rather than in-person programs. Do they help the education process?
100%, yeah, they do. And I think, first of all, I really enjoy being involved in these webinars. I've written up already almost a page of notes after what Terry's gone through there, and just the close alignment that I have, obviously, to the vision. I really enjoyed the elements of the curriculum, linking to the curriculum. That cross-curricular is vital. The student voice and choice, differentiation, and really making the lives of teachers easier. I think that I love that, and that's really some of the big reasons that sort of I get up out of bed in the morning. So it was just really nice to, yeah, see that alignment straight away, and probably why we work so well together, just with those. Definitely, back to the question. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but yes, it just needs to be purposeful. So if you're picking a tool to use, a digital tool or platform to use, it just needs to be purposeful and not just for the sake of using it. I think I used an example, and I'm not sure where I learnt this. Someone else, as you always do, someone else teaches you something and you learn, and then you can share it with others. But one PE teacher once shared with me that one of his, in a co-teaching arrangement, the teacher who was teaching with at the time used the app Coach's Eye, and he was filming a student doing a jump shot, and the student's elbow was out a little bit, and he was filming all different angles and trying to get this. So in the time that it would have taken to use that app, you could have just gone and sort of the coach like moved his elbow in, his or her elbow in, and you would have got the same result. So I guess that's a really good example of what's the outcome, and is it the best, most purposeful tool to use? So I think that's a question I've always used, because there's, I guess, in the world of tech and education, you can drown. It's about really having the end in mind and what's your purpose and outcome, and then selecting the tools that are going to best get you there. So, and I think probably for me as a teacher, it was getting the right balance as well. So having that real blended learning, I love that, because you could bring in obviously the face-to-face and those really important, small group, one-to-one chats, but then also having those online digital resources that you could use to really amplify the teaching and learning. I also used to use YouTube. I love YouTube. I'd make unlisted videos, use them for engagement drivers. So I'd start with these big music numbers. There'd be a big, almost like a Disneyland intro, and the kids would be hooked. The learning intention and the success criteria, and I sort of would make fun of myself, and the kids, there'd be a few jokes, humor, also have the instructions in there. So film kids in the lesson. So, there'd be the outline of the activities that we were going to do, and they would easily follow, and also use them as reflection tools. So I'd actually make the videos in the sessions, and then we'd watch them at the end, and they could then watch and sort of look at their technique and that sort of stuff at the end. And that was a really good reflective tool. I guess that also goes to that next level where, you know, you can do that flipped learning where they take it home. So that really fosters that self-paced, inquiry-based student voice and choice in the learning process. And I really like that. And the best element, probably putting my Cricket Australia hat on, is getting the parents involved, because they're the key decision makers in the family for that, you know, lifelong journey of, you know, physical activity in my case, and getting students active outside school. An example of that was we did the Mascot Challenge recently, which is a 4-week fundamental movement skill program, which was existing in schools, but 2020 being the year it was, we flipped that and created a version. Actually did it with my own son in the backyard during lockdown 1.0, and then that went around the nation, and we had an enormous take up of that in a time where the nation just really needed it most. And that's something that really, you know, got me out of bed in the morning, and just knowing that there are some kids that are, you know, their fundamental movement skills are developing, but also just movement, you know, above all else. So yeah, I think for me, it's a definite yes, but it obviously has that condition of it needs to have its purpose and outcome in mind. So I might leave it there, just being respectful of time.
Thanks, Sean. Some really great utilisation examples of tech there. So Fergus, I might come to you now and just ask about, just going off what Sean said about finding a sense of purpose with the tech that you select in your classroom. How does the range of currently available technology in the classroom influence how you teach on a daily basis?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Look, I would echo a lot of what Sean's just said, and Terry as well in her introduction, that technology has to be targeted appropriately and used appropriately. And that's kind of how it influences my classroom too, which I guess, again, it's sort of senior high school or mid to senior high school. The teacher's still leading the session, and I guess we've got to keep that in mind when we're creating the software or when clients are considering doing so. So in my classroom, we use technology every day. There wouldn't be a day we don't use it. And we use G Suite, Google's G Suite, so sort of collaboration and productivity stuff. But we're always open-minded to the huge range of technologies that are seemingly being developed every day. Personally, I'll give anything a try, and you know, try yourself first and put it into the classroom. Many of them you hang on to, and yeah, a few you'll just leave behind. Maybe you use them for one lesson and forget about them forever. But yeah, we'll use activity-specific software. Maybe it's appropriate for storyboarding if you're looking at history, or maybe there's games or instructive simulations, or a drawing tool like Google SketchUp. So again, like Sean, lots of different tools that are really useful. We've even used Minecraft for assessments at in junior history, which has been super popular with the kids, and great outcomes, learning outcomes as well. So you've got to keep an open mind, but always sort of a healthy amount of skepticism and making sure that it's targeted appropriately. I would also want to reinforce that, yeah, not every classroom has sort of universal connectivity yet. So I was in a relatively privileged inner city school, socio-economically, and even so, there's a huge range in the quality of devices people have, and even the school's network, any school's network. It's such a complex, massive thing being used by possibly over 1,000 people in a day. These things go down. So yeah, you've got to be, yeah, keep in mind that, you know, that there's a little way to go as far as like universal sort of application of technology is concerned. Yeah, but really exciting time to be trying to bring new technologies into different, for different activities.
Definitely. Thanks, Fergus. Some great insights into the classroom there. Now, Georgia, from a client perspective, I know that you guys have been with us for a while, and you talked a little bit about the programs that MLA has with Kimberlin Education, but I wonder if you could talk us through the decisions around using a digital platform for your messages and kind of engaging with the curriculum that way. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, so I suppose, as you're saying, we've obviously worked with Kimberlin for a while now to run a series of curriculum-linked live stream virtual classrooms. We usually run about 8 to 10 a term, and they're free to attend. I mean, as Terry was saying earlier, you know, the beauty of this particular program is that it does make teachers' lives easier. It's free. It's really easy to access. and the kids are really, really engaged. I suppose our purpose ultimately is to increase primary school students' understanding of how red meat is produced and to communicate the nutritious value of Australian red meat as part of a healthy, balanced diet. So as part of that, the sessions are usually hosted by a teacher, obviously yourself, Katie, or one of the other Kimberlin teachers, and they are joined by an Aussie red meat farmer. And so the students are guided through a presentation on screen, which leads them through the paddock to plate journey. So we're having that conversation with them the whole way through. That presentation includes photos and videos from the farmer's property, along with quizzes and different activities, I suppose, to suit those different learning styles and to keep the kids engaged throughout the presentation. So, you know, the farmers, they chat to kids about how they look after their animals, how they care for the land and manage their environments, the different kinds of technology they use on farm, and I suppose how the meat that they produce travels through the supply chain. So within that, we're touching on, you know, a variety of different curriculum topics, I suppose. And the beauty of, I suppose, the virtual platform is that the kids are able to ask questions to the farmer directly. So there's that one-to-one communication. They're able to have their questions answered directly by the farmer, and they're also able to interact with kids in other classes as well, which is really fantastic. So yeah, and I mean, the classes are attended by kids all over the country. We're not restricted, you know, we're not restricted by location, which is fantastic. And I suppose the trend is slightly towards metro-based schools, which is really our target audience, because we're trying to engage with kids that haven't had any, you know, or they've had little to no exposure to the red meat industry. I suppose the other thing, the other part, I suppose the second part of the program is that Kimberlin also produces a number of awesome curriculum linked resources that are posted out to the schools after they've taken part in the class, which is a really great way for us to kind of maintain engagement with them and to continue learning after the class is finished. In the term just gone, term 3 just passed, we delivered eight virtual classrooms, and we had 78 classes attend those 8 sessions, which meant that we reached 3,345 kids, which was a statistic we were really, really happy with. Yeah, so I'd say, I mean, it's a really important program for us. There's I mean, as an industry, I think we're kind of constantly battling, you know, a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and, you know, about how red meat's produced and about nutrition. And it's, you know, it's really important for us that the students hear directly from the people that are working in these industries, that there's that direct touch point, you know, so that they can understand, you know, more about what they're eating, and they can understand where their food's coming from. Yeah, so for us, it's an incredibly important resource, and one that we really value.
Absolutely. And in terms of carrying on delivering those throughout the pandemic and throughout remote learning, I guess it was a really important tool just to kind of continue that educational conversation, not just to inner city schools, but also to remote schools, maybe even School of the Air learners, that kind of thing as well. That must have been quite a big win for you guys. Yeah,
absolutely. And Kimberlin was really good at kind of pivoting very quickly, because obviously we'd usually have the farmer travel from kind of regional Australia to be with the teacher to deliver the class. And Kimberlin was able to arrange for the farmer to stream in from their property, which was, you know, kind of an added bonus, because I meant that the kids could, you know, see the animals running around the background, and they could, you know, actually see their properties, which was really great. Yeah, and I suppose, and we saw that was really successful, because we saw a massive upspike in kids tuning in from Victoria and from Melbourne, especially during that prolonged lockdown period. So it was really important. And I suppose the other factor was that it was just really easy. It was really easy for teachers to deliver that to their students while they're out of the classroom. Yeah, so it was really seamless. Yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. Thanks, Georgia. So Sean, I might come back to you, just talking about trends. My question is, what trends are you seeing in the classroom around technology? But I kind of wanted to add on, as a teacher, do you find yourself constantly keeping up with the kids in terms of getting used to new technologies?
Yeah, well, I guess it's been the most transformative year in the history of teaching this year, and there's been, you know, growth across the board, and it's been essential even for those that potentially have resisted it over the years. Obviously, we've spoken to, you know, the different levels of, you know, some teachers have really thrived under this. I mean, I've got a very good teaching friend, shout out to Mr. James Will from Millgate Primary School, who created a virtual camp for his kids. You know, with all activities and really great take up, even cooking damper with mum and dad at home, you know, so obviously with a few safety precautions there. But, you know, so there are some innovative people out there that have just absolutely thrived. And I think even, you know, sports organisations that have, you know, not been able to run, you know, face-to-face events such as cross country and athletics, where, you know, templates have been made where kids can be, you know, using Strava and Map My Run and actually submit them, and they're having competitions and huge take-ups of thousands, you know, 10,000 students doing this across different states and territories. It just shows that, you know, that they've transformed and really stepped up to the plate. I think a lot of teachers in this time have created a lot of digital resources in terms of video assets, and I think that is really going to shape the next step. Probably a little bit of video fatigue in this year. I know I've got a young son that's in prep, and I think they've gone a bit back to, you know, particularly in prep, the bread and butter of the handwriting, spelling, and maths. But what will happen is those video assets and things that have been created will still be there next year and beyond. So that's where those things that I was touching on, like the blended learning within the learning environment and the flipped learning taking it home, that's something that will be a lasting legacy of this, you know, 2020, what we thought was a big predicament, but has really helped reshape the way that things are done. So yeah, it's going to bring in that new era. And I think the next step, you know, for those teachers that are really wanting to take those next steps is, you know, like Fergus said, using, you know, the G Suite, even like smart technology for you know, Teams and Zoom, which, you know, everybody's used to actually connect within that flipped learning environment, where teachers now have the skills. I know myself, like before this, you know, I wasn't across all of these platforms, but just by being across them now, the chances to connect it beyond the classroom, and particularly in the secondary space, being able to connect kids and get them to work together is a lot easier. And I think, as George has said, like even just having the farmers being able to dial in from such a distance, like that's something that, you know, after this finishes, it's going to be something that remains probably the same, because it's actually more efficient, and the numbers that you've been able to hit with you know, whereas you used to probably have one class, now you're hitting, you know, 78 classes at once, is just amazing in terms of education. So I think, yeah, that collaborative, you know, flipped learning could be like the next steps. I think gamification is something that's, you know, going to really take off. It is in a PE space, particularly in the sort of in the circles that, you know, my circle of friends, really important, because it's undeniable that, you know, embedded in a lot of these programs, you know, level 1, level 2, level 3, and the time and the instant reward, you know, the Angry Bird style. You know, if you're creating those platforms or even just activities in the classroom that have those elements of gamification. I know Mascot Challenge, which is something that we're working on really closely at Cricket Australia. We're going to be, you know, putting a fair bit of work and time into making that a self-guided, gamified experience for kids, and they can actually work through it, and even better, you know, get the parents to come along. And that's also embedded in a lot of the games. You know, all the games I used to play, you know, the kids would, I'd put on the board the different levels and they'd be able to work through those. Some of the other things I see are like Plickers magnets and cards. So they're QR coded magnets that can be read by a device, and you can actually set up your whole class and have, you know, every child allocated a number, and, you know, they can be used for self-reflection based on a success criteria. It can be peer assessment. The teacher can actually just flip them and then literally scan them, and then it all comes back to your computer. I think probably one of the things that, you know, still burning in my ears is the hungry beast of data. So I think that's almost a teacher wellbeing one there with the Plickers cards, that's a smart way to collect a lot of data. An example of that was, a three-way conference late last year, and a parent asked, how is my son going with two-handed strike, for example? And I was able to bring up on a big TV in front of her, like how he'd self-assessed at the start of the year and at the end of the year, and even a couple of little videos that we'd filmed along the way. But really easy because it had been done as part of the learning. It's not like this big thing that you have to, it's not an extra thing that you need to do.
Yeah.
And I think, probably putting my CA hat on a little bit more is, like Kimberlin, we're creating those digital assets to make teachers' lives easier. So I guess we're, in terms of Cricket Australia, creating these, the secondary and primary flipped learning videos, as well as digitising all of the activities that we currently have, so that they can be watched by teacher or student. And we spoke about the different learning styles that then will, you can read it, you can look at the diagram, or you can show your whole class a video. I think in terms of CA, that's where we're going. But probably touched on a few things there in terms of what's going on out in the space. I do have one friend, Mr. Wayne Schultz, who's out at Roxburgh Park Primary School, and he always takes things to the next level. But he's actually got the kids rigged up with GPS units, and so he'll actually monitor their movement patterns throughout a lesson, and then use that as a cross-curricular mathematics tool back in the classroom. And there's been spectacular buy-in from his whole school, and being able to crunch the numbers, and the kids are really engaged, even from using spreadsheets to crunch the numbers, and even measuring with cricket bats. So he's definitely got them the whole school approach there, and movement's the key for the learning. So that's probably enough from me.
That was amazing, Sean. Thank you so much. Some real great examples of innovative teaching and real meaningful assessment for learning there. Now, Georgia, I just want to expand a little bit on what Sean just said about engaging with parents. And in terms of engaging with the wider community for your industry, how do you see the role of digital technology in being able to get out the right message to the right audience?
Yeah, I mean, digital technology is so vital for us. We conduct consumer sentiment research each year. We've been doing that for 10 years, and those stats show us that fewer and fewer Australian kids are visiting red meat farms. They show us that 62% of the population have never actually visited a sheep or a cattle farm, and this number is rising year on year. So, I mean, it used to be that like a lot of people or a lot of kids had grandparents or an aunt or an uncle or someone that lived on the land, but it's just not the case these days. And so kids just aren't exposed to agriculture in the way they once were, once upon a time. So, I mean, as much as we would love to, it's just impossible for us to take large numbers of kids out onto Australian farms, and teachers would know that. Like, it's financially impossible. From a risk perspective, it's impossible. So I suppose, digital technologies are our best next option. It really, and the virtual classrooms in particular are the answer for us. I mean, we can reach thousands of kids a term using this platform. And we know from the feedback that we get that they really work, and that the kids are really engaged, that the teachers enjoy them. We know that they're engaged because, we get so many questions from the kids in one class that we can't answer them all in the space of the class, in the space of the lesson. We have to spend hours after going back to the kids and answering all their questions. So I suppose, that's the thing. And in addition to that, we're providing this free curriculum link service, I suppose, product for teachers to use. I suppose, as we were saying before about COVID, like, had we not already had that technology accessible to us, or had we not, had we not had that program going, or had that experience with the technology, we would have been completely lost when COVID hit. We just would not have been able to, we would not, our voice would have gotten lost. We would not have been able to continue that two-way communication. So it was a real lifeline, particularly during that period. But the I mean, yeah, digital learning, digital technology is definitely the way forward for us in our industry. Yeah, we rely on it completely. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Georgia. Now, Fergus, just to finish, I just wanted to keep going with something that Georgia said there, just about being digital technology being integral to not just industry, but to classrooms as well. So as a teacher, how important is it that students have the opportunities to make connections to outside industries and to experts, I guess, in the real world within Australian classrooms?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I think we're all in fierce agreement on this one, as Georgia said, and as Sean said as well. Complementing their classroom teachers' knowledge, bringing in an outside expert, whether you're in primary school or secondary school, is just fantastic. And the kids would really look forward to those kinds of opportunities. I've taught some sort of mid-high school topics on food sustainability and agriculture and related topics, and we didn't have these kinds of experts. And then obviously getting to know these programs now, I really wish I had at the time, and I know my kids would have loved them. And especially connecting, you know, given my background here in the inner city, predominantly metropolitan kids to sort of regional, rural themes that they wouldn't get exposure to. Again, like the other guys have said, is just invaluable. And I would also say in a high school, yeah, there's an extra layer that those kids are really excited to just look at the, you know, sort of look at the roles, the jobs, the career paths that people out in the community have, and get exposure to things that they might not know about. So they can start sort of, you know, creating in their own mind a better understanding of what society's like and where they might want to end up, which is always different to where you originally think you might want to end up. So yeah, I guess the question we sort of take away is, the question is sort of, what do we take away from 2020? There's been so many challenges, and how can we, and it's accelerated all these trends, and how can we, yeah, take this difficult year and take all those, but take all the new learnings and apply them to what happens in the classroom from now on.
Absolutely, that is the big question, and hopefully we've been able to give you guys joining us a little bit more information to be able to make your own mind up about what to do about the pandemic and how to approach it going forward. So thank you so much, guys. I'm now going to open the floor to everybody joining us today to ask if you've got any questions for our lovely panelists and for our GM Terry here. So if you do have any questions for anyone, whether they're client-based or whether they're classroom-based, do pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. Now, while we're waiting for some of those questions to come through, Sean, I think there's an opportunity that you wanted to extend to some of our participants today in terms of using digital technology with CA themselves.
Yeah, so we've actually, thanks for that, Katie. We've actually in the process of upgrading our website. So I will share it in a moment, the Community Cricket website. So there's lots of resources and more to come. So a lot more digital resources that are coming in the new year. But I just wanted, yeah, just a bit of an awareness piece of, you know, becoming a school ambassador, so that you get sent, this is for both primary and secondary school teachers, that you can be sent a newsletter that will actually highlight digital opportunities for flipped learning. We actually send one video per newsletter, but then next year the carrot will be, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow will be that you'll have access to all of those in one place, including webinars and things. Believe it or not, I'm actually jumping straight into a webinar after this for the cricket classroom. So that'll be number 7, and we're just going to keep rolling. So there's plenty of opportunities, yeah, by becoming a school ambassador. So I'm going to hit the go button on this one. Hopefully this comes up. There it goes. So yeah, it's at the Community Cricket website there, and if you just click on that link, you can actually register, and then yeah, everything coming out of there. I'm pretty brand new, as I said, but I have been very busy, and I get up in the morning to help teachers. So very much everything there already. There's a lot of stuff there that can help you. Even if you're a classroom teacher, there's a lot of stuff you can do there as well. Obviously, it's for physical education in a bit of a cricket lens, but obviously there's outcomes there for all teachers.
Thanks, Sean. That's awesome. It's a great way to see that digital technology isn't just helping students themselves, but also helping teachers to help students too. So thank you. We've got a question for our teachers. I might go to Fergus for this. how can teachers keep up with the changing tech innovations and different directives from the department through such tumultuous times? Great question.
Yeah, look, it's hard. I think I consider myself to be relatively tech savvy for my sort of age group, and even so, you sort of have to put things on ice and wait till you've got a quiet period, a quiet week or two, if you ever get one, to sort of master a new technology. But like Terry said at the start of today's session, some teachers really struggled with it, especially some of the older teachers that have come through, and they're amazing teachers. Their content knowledge is second to none, but they've spent 40 years possibly teaching in an environment where none of this existed. So I think some people, we've all come up hugely this year, but yeah, it's just about try and try again. And with regards to the department, I guess, yeah, I always just keep a healthy skepticism with regards to all of these technologies, and it all comes back to what will actually work in the classroom, what will actually help the kids. Because you can sometimes find yourself trying to use a technology and it's not appropriate. You know, somebody else had a great idea, but they haven't quite executed it perfectly. So yeah, you still got to use your own sort of discretion to see what applies, and yeah, keep at it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fergus. Georgia, this is a good question for you, actually. How do you choose which industries, products, brands, and natural resources that your organisation is prepared to work with to be able to develop an education program?
Yeah, so I suppose we, MLA, Meat and Livestock Australia, is just focused on the red meat industry. So we just work with beef, lamb and goat producers. We're kind of the body that represents those guys. And I suppose part of our remit is to, we conduct a lot of research and development on behalf of the industry, and we also conduct marketing on behalf of the industry. And part of my job is to, I suppose, maintain community trust in the industry, and as part of that, we run a big schools education program, and so yeah, so this is I suppose this is just one component of that program. But yeah, I mean, we so I suppose we use advocates or ambassadors from the industry, people that we identify as being particularly passionate, or I mean, all of our farmers and producers are really passionate, but we work, I suppose, choose to work with producers that that are comfortable in front of the camera and that are happy to talk to the classroom. I suppose that would kind of, I don't know if that entirely answers that question, but I suppose I'm just trying to read through it. I can't see it.
I guess it's just kind of choosing the people that help you represent your brand in the most positive light and in the most useful way for teachers to be able to access the curriculum through those resources. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and we try to use a range of different producers in different areas all throughout Australia, because obviously there's a variety of production systems in Australia. The way they produce beef in Southern Australia is very different to how it's produced in Northern Australia. So I suppose we try and expose kids to a wide variety of different producers and production systems and environmental management systems. So we try and keep it as broad as possible.
Great, thanks, Georgia. Terry, we've got a good question for you here from David. David asks, does Kimberlin offer free online tools or content that companies can look at, or do you need to be a paid customer to look at your programs or content? There's a bit more of a explanation in there, but I might leave it to you to give us a bit of a lowdown on what we at Kimberlin can do for David.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a teacher-specific site called KE Teacher, and that's where we house our resources for our clients. So you're welcome to go and have a look at there and see what's on there and what's available and what's, obviously you can do. You can also look at our case studies on our Kimberlin Education site. So we house a whole heap of case studies that'll tell you the kind of activity we've done in the past. I think within those, they should give you a great idea of the kind of what's possible, what's been done in the past. And if you've got some ideas, give us a call and we can always talk things through. I do understand in your comment, you've talked about budget. We're really aware that budget has affected some of our clients, but it's free to have a chat, so we can always talk.
That's great. Thanks, Terry. And I guess this is one for teachers and for Terry, if you want to jump in on this one as well. We've got a question that's asked, is there anything we can do as an organisation to let teachers know that we have resources that can help them? Sometimes I think the teachers just don't know that we have programs sitting there. So what can they do?
You want to go, Sean?
Oh no, you can go, mate. You go.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to marketing, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
the questioner is correct. There's a lot going on in a teacher's head. It's not just this content stuff. It's a lot of sort of internal administration, student well-being, all that stuff. So it's right. It's very hard to get resources in front of a teacher. Speaking as a teacher, a lot of the resources that I see here at Kimberlin, I would have loved to have found. Had no idea a lot of them existed. So it's all about ensuring that you are marketing those products correctly.
Yeah, and further to that, marketing's paramount. So that was going back to that point of, if you've got resources, it kind of doesn't matter unless you're actually telling the teachers. So we can do marketing plans around that. That can involve, you know, EDMs to our own database of teachers. We can use partner databases. There's, you know, social media advertising. There's a whole kind of gamut of options available to us. But it's really, really important part of educational resources is ensuring your teachers, it gets in front of teachers. There's events as well too.
And Georgia, I don't know if you want to jump in on that one about the amount of effort that MLA as an organisation has put into gaining teachers' trust through marketing to for them to become aware of this program too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Kimberlin has done a lot of that work on our behalf. But also, you know, we have people contacting us all the time directly and kind of asking, you know, and saying, oh, you know, especially some of our stakeholders, you know, they contact us and they're concerned because, you know, their kids have learned something at school, you know, learned something about the industry at school that's, you know, not incorrect, or they've picked up on some kind of misinformation in the media and they've taken it home and, you know, and are asking their parents about it. So we get a lot of people coming to us and saying, you know, how can we expose our kids to the correct information? Where you know, how can they learn more? So yeah, so we, you know, we direct a lot of people to the virtual classrooms through those inquiries. But again, Kimberlin, you know, has a really, you guys have access to databases and kids all over the country's remote, you know, regional, metro. Yeah, so that's been a big help for us in spreading the word. Yeah, because we as an organisation, we're not an educational, you know, organisation. We don't have that access. So I suppose partnering with you guys, it's given us access to all of those communities we wouldn't normally have access to.
Thanks, Georgia. Fergus, one for you here. How do you keep students focused when you're teaching remotely?
So I was teaching all through the COVID at-home learning period early this year in New South Wales, and it was a real challenge, yeah, especially with the age group I was teaching, which was roughly 15 to 18-year-olds. I think the key is the same. The key to sort of engaging them is the same as what it is in the classroom, and that is just you know, having a personal relationship with them and trying to foster their interest in the subject. It is harder to keep a healthy personal relationship remotely. You know, you don't have all that sort of off-topic discussion and bonding that you do have in a classroom. But yeah, the same thing remains. Just keeping those relationships alive. And that's something that's really hard to quantify that teachers are great at, which is really getting to know their students. I think it means when you are communicating online with your students, you have to be 100% bigger than you otherwise would be. I mean, teaching is a bit of a performance anyway, standing in front of a whiteboard. But yeah, over the internet, you have to be a lot bigger. You have to personally engage them. You know, asking direct questions like you might in a classroom, not allowing them to have their cameras off. No silly business in the chats. Yeah, so you really have to be super active in the moment, and then yeah, and just be very aware of maintaining a personal relationship with the kids, making note of who's not really engaging, who seems to be slipping, and so on.
Well, I'm pleased to report that everyone's been very well behaved in this chat, in the webinar.
Lucky.
Terry, I don't know if you want to jump in as a parent here and just offer a bit of insight on how you found your children, your students engaging with different parts of digital technology throughout the lockdown.
Yeah, I think it was challenging in our household. I think from kind of retrospectively, it really helped when the teachers were very clear on what they expected. For example, one teacher was saying, I'm just on chat, but they hadn't actually explained that to any of the students. So that, the students didn't actually know. So perhaps it's about just being really clear and kind of explaining how they're going to engage with the tools and how they're going to use them. But some kids just flourished. They just loved it. They could work autonomously. They really got it. Other kids, I think that they missed that one-on-one that Fergus was just talking about it, that being able to look around and ask a question and not feel like everyone's, is everyone watching me on this platform? So it's different learning styles. See, we talk about different learning styles and how important it is to appeal to everyone. And sometimes different learning styles are forgotten in certain environments. So it's challenging, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really useful. We've got another question here that from David that might require a bigger conversation, David. David asks, when you guys look for information on the latest teaching practices and knowledge to base your programs on, are there any particular sites that you go to for that information? I might just preface that by saying teaching practices is something that you get taught when you're doing your teacher training, and also something you pick up from professional development and I guess in school training sessions, and also just from watching other teachers as well. So I guess your teaching practice or your pedagogy is a bit more of a personal thing that you develop within the classroom. Knowledge, on the other hand, I'm guessing that you mean resources. So where do you find inspiration for your teaching, that kind of thing? Just let me know if I'm on the right track here, David. But Sean, I might go to you. When you were in the classroom, where did you go to find inspiration for your teaching?
Yeah, so one of the things that I decided in 2016 and really changed me as an educator was to open up my 4 walls of the gym and actually start planning with another teacher. And then 2 went to 4, went to this thing called Aussie Phys Ed, which went all the way around Australia, some international schools, and there's about 250 teachers. So I basically collaborated, and we had this thing called Voxer, which was a chat that was then connected to a Google Drive. So we'd have the conversations, and then I don't know if it was Santa and his elves, but overnight the resources were made, and we had the resources. So that was the biggest thing. And I honestly think that because of the connections I made through that network, I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't have done that. Not that it's a bad thing, but I would have probably stayed at my school, my first school, which I was already there for 12 years, but I would have stayed there longer had I not sort of opened up my classroom and really got a bit uncomfortable, had some uncomfortable conversations, met some mentors and things that have just, really changed me as an educator, and found, resources, and, by those conversations, you get pointed to a direction, and, really making sure that you've got the best, approach, and, you trial and error. I mean, like Fergus said earlier, you just get up one more time and you fall down, and eventually, you find what works for you and your students, and every student's different. So, as Terry said, but that would be my biggest thing, is to network with other teachers. I think that sort of informal education is sometimes the best.
Absolutely. And I guess it just highlights that cookie cutter education programs are no longer useful for teachers. They're actually looking for programs that they can take and use and, I guess, distribute to students and allow them to be able to grow on their own and follow their own learning journey. And I guess that's the importance of using a really good educational provider to be able to produce something like that, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and probably one other thing is Twitter. That's probably what led me there, is Twitter. And I know that's a bit outdated, but particularly for educators and Facebook groups, that's where a lot of the gold is, where it's all free and people just share. Like it's another avenue to find like-minded educators and resources. And that would be another thing, like finding for Kimberlin would be to actually find champion teachers on the ground that are going to share, that have humongous followings, and then all of a sudden they all see it because there's a few people that share it. So that's certainly something we do at cricket. So
Great, thanks, Sean. So Jenny's asked, when sharing links to industry resources to teachers, is YouTube accessible for teachers, or is there a more popular platform? Yes, YouTube is very accessible within classrooms. However, we have found that Queensland did block out, or all of Queensland blocked out YouTube for a while, and I'm not sure if that's back on there. Fergus, how is YouTube seen within classrooms at the moment?
Yeah, look, teachers have, I'm talking about the Department of Education in New South Wales, teachers have access to YouTube, and I would personally use YouTube all the time. Students, it's blocked for. So there are other platforms. There's one called Enhanced TV, which is sort of like a vetted version of YouTube. I think all DET students have access to that, certainly at my school, universal access through the DET portal. And all teachers do as well, and it's very similar in the way it operates, video content, and it's streaming, and that's fantastic. So it's cheap. There's no shortage of edtech companies doing other sort of digital platforms that are similar. But yeah, if you can market it appropriately, there's no reason a teacher couldn't show a YouTube clip. I guess the challenge is you can whack it on YouTube, but how do you get it in front of the teachers and then in front of the students?
That's it. Thanks, Jenny. I hope that answered your question. So I am mindful of time, so I might do a bit of a wrap up now, guys. I just wanted to share the results from our polls of what you think has been the most challenging aspect for teachers in 2020. And interestingly, most of you chose engaging students and online learning. And that's really interesting because that is the same result as the teacher experience poll run by Macquarie University of 2020. Most teachers found that engaging students was their biggest priority and their biggest challenge. So great job for choosing the same answer there. Really interesting. So before we finish, I just wanted to finish off with a final quote, final thoughts from Ken Robinson, who sadly passed away this year. So Ken Robinson was an educational visionary, a thought leader and advocate for creative education that places the strength of both teachers and students, a lot of what we've been talking about here today. And Mr. Robinson said part of the adventure here is not just developing creativity in kids, but thinking about school in a different way. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And if you'd like to come on an adventure with us at Kimberlin Education to develop your educational journey and inspire teachers and students, head over to KE Teachers to check out our resources or give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. But thank you very, very much for joining us today. Thank you to Sean, to Fergus, and to Georgia. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for Terry for giving us an insight into Kimberlin Education. And thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you at the next Kimberlin client event. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Katie.
Bye.
Thanks, Katie.
Bye.